Ouroboros on Negotiators. Seems logical, right? Well, I actually hated it. Like, genuinely hated it. The main reason being is it just felt really awkward. And it came in awkward of two stages. The first being that at base, Ouroboros is 31% crit chance. If you're at SHD 1000 or have your crit chance maxed out for your watch, you're at 41. Adding in Negotiators, which will give you another 15%, now suddenly you're at 56, just from Ouroboros and 4-piece Negotiators. This doesn't seem like a bad thing, but you now need to wonder what other pieces are you going to put in. Now you can go overcap just to help bolster your secondary weapon, which I actually would recommend, which kind of also then seems like a waste for Ouroboros, and you're probably just going to be more better off. Good wording. It's going to be more beneficial for you to just use a different weapon altogether. Now, despite the fact that Ouroboros, and I've been saying it from the start, it's like 50 to 60% more powerful than basically any other weapon in pretty much most circumstances. It's a loose bracket. It's very hard to beat the overall DPS of Ouroboros. Even some shotguns have a hard time. The downside to this is the overall mechanic of Negotiators itself. You need to be able to mark enemies to maximize your output. If you don't mark enemies to maximize your output, you actually end up having a pretty low output. Problem is, with Ouroboros' RPM, it's so much better suited to just doing single target. Right, that guy, get rid. That guy, get rid. Not and then hope for the best. Simply just because at that point, you're either dead, or, as I found out, I was struggling for ammo the entire time, which is why I hated it mostly. Like, it required me to basically alter the overall very minimalistic understanding of my build. Headshot handling or crit chance, crit damage. Like, in terms of DPS builds, that's basically your two variations. With Negotiators, I found myself needing to go crit damage, headshot. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it also does mean in order to make a Negotiators build absolutely work for just Ouroboros, you end up having to farm some, I don't want to call them weird pieces, but peculiar for the circumstance that we are in with Ouroboros. You can go crit damage handling, but to be fair, this weapon's got more than enough handling to be able to deal with most of everything, and adding in 2 8% rolls isn't going to give you that much. So in order to bolster the damage, I found myself having to go for headshot. And this is where it got really annoying, which is also why a lot of the footage that I'm going to be giving with Ouroboros simply has Memento, because I can't really overproduce crit chance if I just use Memento. I'm literally using Memento as a crutch to not farm at this point. And then going back to the overall DPS of Ouroboros, I found that trying to pair it with Negotiators was just more problematic than it was actually worth, which is weird. And it is simply just because the weapon is very much ammo hungry and performs exceptionally well single target. Trying to take them down in multiples, tagging enemies with Negotiators to then push forward, ended up being just so annoying that I genuinely hated this recording. It actually got to a point where someone sent me an invite and I just, out of absolute rage, just Alt F4'd my game because I knew that meant I had to start the recording again. Yeah, first world YouTuber problems. It was bizarre. Like, I literally got an invite and I just went, and yeah, it was quite strange. So yeah, I don't actually recommend this. Now, this isn't to say it's not going to be worthwhile, and if you're a fan of Negotiators and this is like 100% your playstyle, you probably might like it. I say probably might, like I'm adding a double probability conundrum here, but I didn't really see the benefit. Like, there was nothing that this could do that Hunter's Fury couldn't do more efficiently, better, and save me ammo. There were several times throughout trying to get a decent recording, which is why I resorted to just doing bounties in this area, because I knew the vast majority of it would be me running around in a circle and not trying to deal with Negotiators, which is probably not the best way to go, but honestly that is how this made me feel. Trying to get stacks with Negotiators became a chore. Trying to tag enemies with Negotiators became a chore. It ended up just sort of being like, I'm just resorting to just single target DPS, which is not how Negotiators works. So why is this going to be of benefit? And I really just couldn't find an answer, simply just because of how Unga Bunga Ouroboros is. That being said, I do have 2 builds, which we're just going to go over. Now, this is going to be like the staple for basically every gear set. It's going to be Grupo and then Sokolov. There's not really much else you could put in here to actually bolster the damage. You could go 2 Sokolov, it's going to give you the exact same thing, but I'm just not sure how much people actively farm Sokolov at this point. However, hopefully what you can see is the chest and backpack both have Obliterate and Unstoppable Force. These are going to be the best in slot talents for pretty much every SMG build. And then hopefully you also notice that the 4-piece Negotiators are just all crit damage, all of the mods are crit damage. And then on the actual chest and backpack themselves, it's headshot crit damage. This still gives us 56% crit chance. You can add a crit chance mod somewhere or a roll somewhere. It is going to put you at 62 on Ouroboros, which is a bit of a waste on Ouroboros, but hopefully could bolster the secondary weapon. We get 198% critical hit damage before Negotiator stacks, just add another 40 on, and we get 90% headshot. So we are going to be mostly focusing on the headshot things with an SMG. Good luck. Seriously, good luck. Other than that, there's not really much to go over. We will be going over the Negotiators backpack in a bit, and obviously we do have a second option, which is obviously going to be what I'm running here, Memento. With Memento, we near enough are the same. We're still at 56% critical hit damage. We've dropped 10% headshot, so we're down to 80, and we've lost 12% crit damage, so we end up at 186. What we get from this is a tier 2 shield, a little bit of armor regen, and another 30% weapon damage. It's going to be mostly up to you as to what one is preferable. I mostly actually preferred the Memento one, and I can't believe I'm saying this, just because the overall performance of Negotiators with Ouroboros was very lackluster, and I found myself just sort of like staring off into the middle distance like some absolute weirdo, that I kind of actually ended up having to need Memento just to keep myself moving and pushing forward. And like the regen was nice, having the tier 2 shield was nice. It's like the first time I've ever actually found Memento saving me, which was interesting. I didn't like the feeling. I just didn't. I am a Revive Hive main after all. Now, Negotiators backpack. Obviously, this is going to transfer 100% of our crits. The downside to this is we are going to lose a hefty chunk of damage. A hefty amount. Considering we're unable to bolster our damage through the use of something like Perfect Focus, it basically leaves us with either Intimidate or Obliterate. We can go Glass Cannon, but I wouldn't recommend it running around like a lunatic with Glass Cannon. So we're basically left with Intimidate or Obliterate, which by itself is not going to be enough damage to help bolster Ouroboros. Considering the overall performance of this build is relying on total weapon damage and crit damage. Yeah, we got a little bit of detox thrown in there on the weapon, but it's just 10%. We're getting 25% total weapon damage, and we're getting a metric ton. We're at 198% critical hit damage at base. Adding in Negotiators itself, we get another 40%. So we end up at like 238% critical hit damage. Don't get me wrong, this is a high number, but you get more damage from lower numbers, just more multipliers, essentially. Having just these two main ones, total weapon damage and crit damage damage itself being a chance, it comes from crit chance. It just wasn't enough to help bolster it, which therefore leads into the whole question of, is the Negotiators backpack actually worth it, transferring 100% of our crit? Essentially, I found that you're transferring 100% of fuck all, which was depressing and lackluster and really, really not helpful. So I would advise against it. I'm sure somewhere, somehow, there is going to be some absolute god tier speedrunner player that comes out with some amazing setup that uses Negotiators with the backpack and Ouroboros. However, what you need to remember on this side is we're not those people. And I mean that like quite sincerely. I don't mean that to be like a dick. I've tried several times to replicate Hutler's play. Hutler is a very, very good player. I can't replicate it. I've tried several times to replicate how Ronan does things. Like, I came to the conclusion that you cannot melee only your way through a heroic mission. Ronan went, hold my beer. An hour and 15 minutes later, he melee'd his way through heroic Lincoln Memorial. Just melee. He did it. So, can Negotiators backpack be used? Is my opinion on Negotiators on Ouroboros wrong? Well, yes and no. It's going to be down to you on how you play. If you are a friggin' hardcore casual like me, I doubt you'll really like it. Simply just, one, it kind of defeats the purpose of Ouroboros. Two, it kind of goes against how Negotiator works. I am a fan of Negotiators. I have played Negotiators. I know how Negotiators works. To me, I felt like Ouroboros was so much more in the single target playstyle rather than tag and move on kind of thing. It just didn't feel it. I just didn't feel it at all. I actually preferred the True Patriot setup over this, which is Q Rousey coming in the comments and telling me I'm a friggin' idiot. Yeah, that's just how I felt. I really, really did not like this, and because of that, I don't recommend it as a permanent setup. However, I do recommend you try it. Don't just take my opinion on this. Do try it. Figure it out. See what you like. That being said, have fun. Good luck. Don't die. It's bad for the health.